Ever since I can remember, my life's been all about fish and farm. Dad had this big vision of making our place the top trout hatchery in the country, and darn if he didn't make it happen. I was right there beside him, knee-deep in pond water, learning the ropes. It wasn't just a job, it was our life, our legacy. I grew up chasing the shadows of fish in the water, learning the ins and outs of the business before I even knew what the word business meant. "Anna," Dad would call. "Get over here. Time you learned how to sort 'em proper." Sorting the trout was an art, separating the vibrant, thrashing life into groups that would define their journey in our farm. One evening, when the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Dad pulled me aside. He had that look in his eyes, the one that said he was about to impart wisdom. "Look, kiddo," he started, his voice serious. "I ain't gonna be around forever. He gestured to the expanse of water and land that stretched out before us, "this is gonna be yours. You gotta be ready to take care of it, expand it, make it something even bigger." I remember laughing it off then. "Come on, Dad. You're gonna outlive us all," I joked, not wanting to think about a world without him. He just shook his head, his eyes softening. "Just promise me, Anna. Promise me you'll keep this place alive, make it thrive." Then, when I hit 25, cancer took Dad away. It hit us like a ton of bricks. Mom, she just couldn't handle it, got real sick herself. So, there I was, stuck with running the whole shebang. Dad always had big dreams for the place, and I wasn't about to let them die with him. He'd talked about branching out into ornamental fish and even starting up a livestock bit, considering all the land we had. Sounded like a plan, but with Mom sick and the farm needing all hands on deck, my dreams had to take a back seat. I hired a few folks to help out with the heavy lifting. Running a fish farm's no joke. There's the feeding, the cleaning, making sure everything's running smooth. It's a never-ending cycle of work, but someone's gotta do it. Late nights, I'd find myself by the pond, just staring at the water, thinking about Dad. He wanted this life for me, but man, it was tough going it alone. "You got this, girl," he'd say if he could see me now, trying to juggle it all. But those moments of missing him, they couldn't last long. There was always something needing doing. Workers to oversee, fish food to buy, tanks to clean, and not to mention looking after Mom. She was a fighter, but this had knocked her down hard. It wasn't easy, keeping things afloat. But I was determined. Dad had built something amazing here, and I wasn't about to let it sink on my watch. "We're doing this, Dad," I'd whisper to the night air. "I'm not letting your dream die. I'm not one for the glitz and glam, give me muddy boots and Dawn's first light over a fancy dress any day." But when the invite came for that charity dinner, something inside me whispered, "Why not?" Maybe it was the endless days cooped up with fish and feed, or Mom's soft encouragement from her sickbed, her way of saying, "Live a little, honey." So, I swapped my overalls for the only decent dress I owned and stepped into a world so far removed from my own. The dinner was a whirlwind of faces and small talk, a sea of glitter and fake smiles that I navigated with polite nods. Then, out of nowhere, these two brothers, Jake and Chris, crashed into my world. They were like a gust of fresh air in a stifled room, with their easy laughs and lack of pretense. "Never thought I'd meet a genuine fish farmer here," Jake said, his grin infectious, as we stood awkwardly by the buffet. "Yeah, well, I'm rethinking my life choices as we speak," I shot back, unable to suppress a smile. His brother, Chris, chuckled, his camera never far from his hand, capturing every moment as if it was gold. Their jokes were simple, their demeanor unpolished, and suddenly, I didn't feel so out of place. When Jake asked about the farm, his curiosity seemed genuine, a rarity in these circles. "So, what's the big deal with fish farming? Sounds fishy to me," he joked, and I found myself laughing more freely than I had in months. His interest didn't wane as the night went on. Instead of boring me with tales of their online escapades, Jake listened intently as I spoke of my dreams for the farm, of the weight of my father's legacy on my shoulders. When I let slip about the farm's turnover in a moment of unguarded pride, his eyes lit up, not with greed, but with what I took for admiration. Damn, that's impressive. You're doing something right, huh? His words were like a balm, soothing the constant worry that I was failing my family. When he suggested visiting the farm, I surprised myself by agreeing. Watching him and Chris wander through the hatcheries, their laughter bouncing off the water, something in me shifted. Jake's excitement at everything, from the most mundane task to the intricate details of fish breeding, felt like a validation of everything I'd been striving for. You know, I could get used to this, Jake said, his hand brushing mine as we stood watching the sunset over the pond. His voice held a warmth that made my heart skip. It was crazy, all of it, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of something new, something thrilling. Mom, ever the voice of reason, didn't share my enthusiasm. Be careful, dear. Men like him, they don't settle well with our kind of life. It's too real for them, she warned, her voice frail but filled with concern. I wanted to believe her, I did. But Jake's promises, his vows to stand by me, to embrace the farm life, they wove a spell I desperately wanted to cling to. He's different, Mom. He wants this, us, more than anything else, I defended, my voice laced with a hope I hadn't felt since Dad passed. Our wedding was a simple affair, a celebration of love amidst the backdrop of our life's work. Chris filmed it all, his camera capturing the raw, unfiltered joy of two worlds colliding. The farm, with its endless skies and the gentle lull of water, bore witness to our vows. It was perfect, despite the nagging doubt that occasionally whispered, "What if Mom's right?" Life on the farm took a new turn when Jake moved in. Initially, his enthusiasm seemed genuine. He'd wander around with his camera, capturing every mundane task as if it were a spectacle. But as days turned into weeks, the facade began to crumble. "Hey, babe, watch this," he'd call out, gesturing for me to redo a task, just so he could get a better angle. It was all for show. The reality hit hard one afternoon as I was knee-deep in pond maintenance, and Jake was nowhere to be found. I spotted him eventually, lounging under the shade of an old oak, phone in hand, lost to the world. Marching over, I couldn't hide my frustration. "Thought you were gonna help today. These ponds don't clean themselves, you know." He looked up, a lazy smile spreading across his face. I am. Just taking a little break. Gotta keep the fans updated, right? It was the same excuse every time. His help was minimal, his interest fleeting unless it served his online persona. Even when he did pitch in, it was half-hearted, his efforts more a hindrance than a help. I remember the first time I tried to teach him about the feed ratios for the trout. "So, you gotta make sure it's precise. Too much and you're wasting feed, too little and they won't grow right," I explained, handing him the scoop. He took it, nodding, but his attention was elsewhere. "Got it. But hey, wouldn't it be cool if we did a dramatic feeding frenzy video? Imagine the views on that." The seriousness of our work, the balance of life in our hands, reduced to mere content for views. It grated on me, but love has a way of painting red flags as mere decorations. My mom, ever the observant one, despite her illness, saw through him from the start. One evening, as I sat by her bedside, she took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "That boy, he's not here for the farm, or for you, not really. You see it, don't you?" I wanted to deny it, to defend him, but the words stuck in my throat. Deep down, I knew. Yet, acknowledging it felt like admitting a defeat I wasn't ready to face. After yet another day, where his promise to help turned into hours of him fiddling with his phone, I had enough. "Jake, I really need you to actually help around here. Not just for show," I said, the annoyance clear in my voice as I wiped the sweat from my brow. The farm wasn't a playground, it was hard work, and I was doing it all. He paused, something in his expression shifting. For a moment, I thought maybe he finally got it. "Look, I know I haven't been all hands-on with the farm stuff," he started, his tone surprisingly serious. His eyes flicked to his brother, who was leaning against the barn door, watching us. "But how about I handle the finances, huh? Take that load off you?" His brother nodded, almost imperceptibly, but I caught it. A silent conversation seemed to pass between them, one I wasn't privy to. It gave me pause, but the sheer thought of having one less thing on my to-do list was tempting. "You sure you're up for that?" I asked, skepticism heavy in my voice. Managing the books wasn't glamorous work, but it was critical to keeping the farm afloat. "Yeah, babe, I got this. Trust me," Jake said, with a confidence that didn't quite reach his eyes. His brother pushed off from the door and added, "Jake's got a head for numbers. You won't regret it." Maybe it was the exhaustion talking, or the part of me that still wanted to believe in the man I married, but I agreed. "All right, you take over the finances." "But Jake, this is serious. We can't afford any mistakes." He nodded eagerly, almost too eagerly. "You got it. I'll take care of everything. You won't have to worry about a thing." 6 months into our marriage, Jake hit a rough patch with his vlogging. Views were down, and so was the money. One evening, he dropped the bombshell. "Babe, I gotta head to the city, figure some stuff out with my brother. The channel's tanking," he said, not even looking up from his phone. I was slicing vegetables for dinner, and I paused, knife in midair. "And what about the farm? What about us?" My voice was calm, but inside, I felt a storm brewing. He shrugged, packing his camera gear with more care than he'd ever shown our life together. "It's just for a while. You can handle things here, right?" I nodded, tight-lipped. Deep down, I knew I could handle the farm, I always had. But watching him walk out that door, I felt a loneliness clamp down on me, cold and unforgiving. Not 2 weeks later, Mom's health took a nosedive. She had been my rock, and now she was slipping through my fingers. When she passed, I was a mess. I called Jake, desperate for a shred of comfort. "Jake, Mom's gone. I need you." I sobbed into the phone. There was a pause, and then, "Babe, I'm swamped. The city's buzzing, and we're onto something big. I can't just drop everything." His words hit like a slap. Too busy. For his own wife's grief. I hung up, the phone slipping through my numb fingers. 3 agonizing months later, Jake decided to grace us with his presence. He strutted onto the farm as if he hadn't abandoned me, when I needed him most. "Look at this place. It's been too long. But hey, I've got news," he announced, a grin plastered on his face. I was in the middle of feeding the fish, my hands covered in muck. "News?" I echoed, not sure I wanted to hear what he considered important. "Yeah, found a new feed supplier. Cheaper, faster growth. We're gonna save a ton," he said, his eyes alight with what I assumed was a rare flicker of responsibility. I straightened up, wiping my hands on my apron. "We don't use chemicals, Jake. You know this. Our reputation is built on quality, natural growth." He waved me off, his excitement undimmed. It's just business, babe. We need to think about profits. Besides, I've got even bigger plans." That caught my attention. "Bigger plans?" He nodded, eagerly. "A massive event right here. Celebrities, influencers, the works. It'll put us on the map." I stared at him, disbelief and anger swirling. "An event? With all these people, and fireworks? Do you even understand what that could do to the fish, to the farm?" His face fell into a frown, his patience thinning. "It's decided, all right? It's gonna be epic." I watched, helpless, as the preparations began. Trucks rolled in, carrying equipment that had no place on a farm. Tents sprung up like mushrooms after rain, transforming the land into a foreign spectacle. As the day of the event dawned, the farm no longer felt like my sanctuary. It was invaded, overtaken by strangers with no care for the life we nurtured. The air buzzed with anticipation, a stark contrast to the usual serene mornings. Jake was everywhere, playing the gracious host, while I lingered on the sidelines, watching the chaos unfold. The fish ponds were off limits, but that didn't stop the occasional guest from wandering too close, their curiosity piqued by the very heart of our farm they knew nothing about. As evening approached, the concert began. Music vibrated through the air, an alien sound against the backdrop of nature. I watched from afar, my heart sinking with each beat. Then came the fireworks. Bright, loud, and utterly terrifying. I could only imagine the panic it caused beneath the water's surface, the home to our precious fish, now a battleground of noise and light. The fireworks had just fizzled out, leaving behind a smoky silence that hung over the farm like a bad omen. I was clearing up some of the mess left by the guests when I heard them, Jake and his brother, huddled together in the shadows, their voices low but charged with excitement. "That was epic, man. Did you see the views rolling in? Our channel's gonna explode after this," Jake boasted, his voice carrying a note of triumph that made my skin crawl. His brother chuckled, a greasy sound that filled the night. "Yeah, those clowns eat it right up. Fools, all of 'em. Easy as pie." I crept closer, hidden by the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. This was the man I married, speaking so coldly, so calculatingly about the very people who supported him. Then their conversation took a turn, sending shivers down my spine. "So, about the farm," Jake's brother whispered, his voice barely audible. "You think she'll fall for it?" Jake snorted, a sound dripping with contempt. "Of course, she will. She's clueless, a complete fool. Just a little charm, and she'll sign whatever I put in front of her. Might not even have to forge it." They shared a low, conspiratorial laugh, and something in me broke. My mother's warnings, the doubts I'd pushed aside, all came crashing down in that moment. The next evening, at dinner, I faced them both. Jake, with his easy smile and lying eyes, and his brother, the silent accomplice. They exchanged quick glances, thinking I was none the wiser. I smiled back, a mask of complacency over my raging thoughts. "Dinner's great, isn't it? Hope the farm's growing on you, Jake," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "Oh, it is. It's fantastic here, Anna. We're gonna do great things," he replied, reaching for my hand across the table. His touch, once comforting, now felt like a serpent's coil. His brother nodded, adding, "Yeah, we've got big plans. This place has so much potential." I withdrew my hand gently, still smiling. "I'm glad to hear it. I've got some plans of my own, you know. For the farm." They paused, a flicker of unease crossing their faces. "Oh? Like what?" Jake asked, his voice edged with a hint of caution. "Just some ideas I've been toying with. You'll see," I said, keeping my tone light, airy, as if I hadn't just uncovered their betrayal. Right after the dust settled from that fiasco of an event, I knew I had to do something drastic. First stop was the family lawyer, Mr. Davis. His office smelled of leather and old books, a comfort in the chaos. "Mr. Davis, I need to lock down the farm's finances. Jake can't have access anymore," I said, straight to the point. He raised his eyebrows, peering at me over his glasses. "That serious, Anna? All right, let's get the paperwork started." Then, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a PI, a guy named Carl, who had a reputation for getting to the bottom of things. A week later, he laid it all out for me. Jake and his brother had been funneling money out of the farm, spending it on their wild ideas and pocketing the rest. My heart sank. I was furious, not just at them, but at myself, for letting it happen. Armed with evidence, I marched to the police station. Handing over the documents, I felt a mix of relief and dread. "They've been stealing from the farm," I told the officer, my voice steady, despite the storm inside. When Jake and his brother got picked up by the cops, Jake had the nerve to call me. "Anna, you gotta bail us out. It's a misunderstanding," he pleaded over the phone. I couldn't help but laugh. "Misunderstanding? I think it's pretty clear. Enjoy your stay," I replied, hanging up with a click. It felt like a weight lifted, but there was still work to do. I decided to go public with the whole mess. If Jake loved the spotlight so much, he was about to get it, just not in the way he wanted. I called up a local TV station and some of Jake's rival bloggers. "Come to the farm. See what his grand plans did," I told them. They came, cameras and all, capturing the aftermath of the event. Dead fish floated in the ponds, victims of the loud explosions and chaos. The smell was awful, a tangible sign of the damage done. Standing there, in front of the cameras, I told the story. This is what happens when fame and greed take over. This was our livelihood, and they nearly destroyed it for views. The backlash was immediate. The internet exploded with the truth of their actions, showcasing the dead fish, the ruined farm. Cartoonists had a field day with the brothers, turning them into caricatures of greed and folly. Jake's channel? It tanked, losing followers faster than a sinking ship sheds cargo. Advertisers pulled out, not wanting to touch him or his brother with a 10-foot pole. I wasn't done, though. Fueled by rage and a need for justice, I filed for divorce and slapped them with a lawsuit for every penny they cost me and the farm, tallying up to a cool $1,500,000. It felt like declaring war, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally fighting back. Riding the wave of support, I started my own YouTube channel. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my story, my family's legacy. Surprisingly, or maybe not so much, people rallied around me. Subscribers poured in, eager to see the farm's comeback story unfold. Jake tried to weasel his way back in, calling, texting, showing up with lame apologies. "Babe, let's talk about this. We can fix it," he'd plead, but I was done. Done with lies, done with him. I had a farm to rebuild and a future to secure. The court's decision was the final nail in the coffin of their schemes. The judge awarded me $1 million in damages. Watching Jake and his brother scramble to pay up, on top of facing charges for attempted fraud, was more satisfying than I'd like to admit. They were finished, professionally and publicly. The verdict was clear: they were frauds, and everyone knew it. In the end, they lost everything: their followers, their credibility, and any respect they might have had. The sun was just peeking over the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the farm, now bustling with life and more vibrant than ever. Standing by the fence, I watched the new day dawn, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long while. Mike, my oldest employee, walked up, a coffee mug in each hand, and handed me one. "Mornin', Anna. Looks like it's gonna be a good day." I took a sip, the warm bitterness of the coffee grounding me. "Yeah, it does. We've come a long way, haven't we?" He nodded, leaning on the fence beside me. "Sure have. Never thought I'd see this place lookin' this lively again. Those ornamental fish tanks are something else." Laughing, I glanced at the gleaming tanks filled with vibrant colors, a far cry from the traditional trout ponds we were used to. "They're beautiful, aren't they? And profitable too. Who would have thought?" Mike chuckled. "You did. That's who. Always knew you had a vision for this place. More than just trout and feed." The conversation shifted as we discussed the day's tasks when my phone buzzed. It was an email from a local school asking if we could host a field trip. "Looks like we're becoming a community staple," I said, showing Mike the email. "That's great news. Education's just as important as business. These kids could learn a lot from what you've built here," Mike said, a hint of pride in his voice. I smiled, the reality of what we were building here becoming clearer with each passing day. This farm wasn't just about recovery, it was about setting a new standard, about resilience, education, and moving forward. And as for the future? It was as bright as the morning sun stretching across the fields. There were plans to expand, ideas for sustainability projects, community outreach, and so much more. The betrayal that once threatened to define my story had instead paved the way for a new chapter, one filled with hope, growth, and new horizons. Mike's voice pulled me back to the present. "Ready to get started? Those fish aren't gonna feed themselves." Laughing, I nodded. "Let's do it. There's no place I'd rather be." As we walked back towards the heart of the farm, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready. ready to face them head-on, with the same determination and spirit that had brought me this far. The future was unwritten, but for the first time in a long while, I was excited to see where the journey would take me.